Hello and welcome to 5-Year Club video number 82. Today we're going to talk about Lilburn, Georgia, and the same 10-year equity calculation I did yesterday, but for my neighborhood in San Jose. Sadly, we only have data today since 1996 because I grabbed the data from Zillow's research website, and they only gave me the monthly average or median price per square foot, the median price per square foot for Lilburn, Georgia's zip code, which I guess is 30047, if you didn't know. Yeah, so let's get to it. The first thing I did is I multiplied those dollars per square foot numbers by 2,500 to represent like a pretty nice sized ranch house. And then I inflation adjusted all of those prices to $1996. So everything we're going to talk about is in $1996. You can see that the price graph over time is a bit different from San Jose. And I think what's especially different is that this dip just really plummets very far down. Let's see, yeah. And then, it comes back up, but I would bet you anything, because I lived through it, that it comes up slower than, it recovers slower than San Jose. And of course, we have not reached the previous peak in kind of real $1996 in Lilburn, Georgia. Prices are still depressed. And I think this is the case in a lot of areas around the country. In the dense, popular coastal cities, we have overall upward price trends, and in a suburb like Lilburn, Georgia, we do not have an overall real price trend upwards. We have an overall real price trend downwards, at least since 1996. So that's, the past 22 years. And I've got to say that visiting my hometown, it kind of looks like it. Sorry, y'all. It's true. I'm not saying that it's really dramatic, because it's not. It's just the feeling I have when I drive through the area. And these are the 10-year equity outcomes, all outcomes for all the cohorts 1996 going forward. And we can see there is a large number of cohorts that are underwater and still underwater after 10 years. And, then also some cohorts that did okay. But very few people are kind of going exponential here. And if we look at the spreadsheet, like we saw last time, we can see that there is this big old blob of people who have less equity in their home than their down payment. And we don't see any green at all like we saw in San Jose. Green meant that they had more equity at that point than they had purchased the home for. And we're not seeing any of that here because, in large part, we do not have kind of an overall price trend upward to drive that. It's also just less data. Fewer cohorts being analyzed. Yeah, so this is all of the data. And then if we only look at people who bought, this is the 20-year data. So that's the 10-year data, outcomes in 10 years. This is outcomes in 20 years. When we were looking at my neighborhood in San Jose, we had significantly better data around this point. People got out of kind of bad situations faster. I think that's also in part due to less data being available for Lilburn, so I'm not going to blame them too much. But this does look more negative than the San Jose graph looked. And that's what the 20-year data looks like. And even over 20 years, we're not seeing people who magically get more equity through price appreciation than they purchased the home for originally in terms of real $1996. And again, that is because the overall price is trending downward for this area. People who bought above the trend line from 1996 onward, a lot of them ended up underwater. And I guess this is not surprising because the combination of downward trending prices in general and that big dip in 2008, that's definitely going to do it to you. People who bought below the trend line, though, and this was actually a bit surprising to me, even though there's an overall price trend downwards, people who are able to buy beneath it have done pretty well in terms of equity in the first 10 years. For sure, this data is probably dominated by people who bought in 2009, 2010, 2011, after prices had crashed. Actually, it might even be, let's see, what were the decent years were 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. Yeah. So for sure, this is dominated, I think, by this cohort right here rather than anything else. But it still is a much, much more pleasant outcome than this. And it just reinforces to me the benefits of buying below the historic trend line when it comes to your flexibility in the first 10 years of home ownership. What is my conclusion from today? Well, I gotta say, because there's less data, it's only from 1996, my methods are not very good, for lack of a better word. I just am using a linear trend line. And also I'm just using median price per square foot data for the area rather than looking at a particular neighborhood or looking at a particular kind of set of homes. In other words, upper middle class homes versus middle class ranches versus homes that are 800 square feet or whatever the criteria is. I don't want to make too many pronouncements about Lilburn, Georgia, because I think my data set is kind of crappy and there's just not a lot of data for me to be confident relying on this to make big decisions. It's obvious, if you buy above this trend line, but it's kind of like self-fulfilling because this trend line is based on the history that's already happened. So saying if you buy above or below in retrospect, it doesn't have as much meaning when you don't have as much data because you're less confident in the trend line because that trend line is totally dominated by, this 2008 crash. And if we looked at it over maybe 50 years, we would see something a lot more flat. But what this research does emphasize to me is that based on the past 22 years of data, housing market trends like 2008 and the recovery from 2008 are going to dominate your outcomes in the first 10 years, not long-term housing trends. So these people who had equity, they have equity because they bought at a good time relative to that fast 2008 crash. And that timing of buying in this area right here is enough to, in the first 10 years, to kind of override this long-term downward trend in real home prices in that area. Now, if we got more data on this, would this kind of flatten out and not be as ill an omen? Yeah, sure, maybe. I would love to include the early 90s and the 80s data in this analysis. I think it would be super helpful, but I don't know where to access it yet. So, yeah, not yet, guys. Sorry. All right, that's it for 5-Year Club video number 82. Short video. I am working. I would love to make the spreadsheet that I've constructed more accessible, and especially I would love to help automate some of this data input from this Zillow data, even though it's only 21 years of data. But that's really a weekend activity because I'm just too busy working during the week. I hope it's helpful, though, and have a fabulous evening.